Santiago Canyon College is an innovative learning community in Orange, California, with more than 260 certificate and degree programs. Santiago Canyon College is a proud sponsor of community programming and OC World.
OC World is made possible by the generous contributions of Marisla Foundation, Keith and Judy Swain Family Foundation, Wells Fargo Bank, the University of California, Irvine, Orange County Community Foundation, Farmers and Merchants Bank, and viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to OC World. I'm Steve Churm, your guest host for this program. If Frank Kim passed you on the sidewalk or in the frozen foods section of your neighborhood grocery store, you probably wouldn't recognize the soft-spoken, unassuming career bureaucrat. He might strike you more as a college professor or an accountant, but certainly not the former chief executive officer of the third most populous county in California and the sixth largest in the nation. Beginning in 2015 and then serving for 9 years before recently stepping down, Kim was indeed Orange County's top public official, overseeing a budget that has grown to $9.5 billion annually, with more than 18,000 employees. The county sheriff, the district attorney, and the heads of 21 other departments all reported directly to Kim. Despite the breadth and heft of this post, Kim has been widely praised for deftly guiding Orange County through a global pandemic, a homelessness crisis, and multiple major construction projects during his nearly decade-long run as the county's top executive. One former member of the Board of Supervisors described Kim's leadership style as, quote, professional, thorough, and remarkably positive, with an overlay of humility that has allowed this son of a Korean immigrant to become a widely respected problem solver and a consensus builder, both locally and statewide. It may also explain why the current 5-member Board of Supervisors, who Kim answered to, has yet to agree on a successor despite months of interviews, and why others fear it may be difficult, even impossible, to replace Kim, the longest-serving CEO in county history. Now, recently retired, the man who literally was on call 24/7 for years, sat down with OC World inside the headquarters of Orange County United Way to reflect on his remarkable run and impact as Orange County's top civil servant. Frank, welcome to OC World, and thank you for taking some time to really reflect on a career that by any metric has really been unrivaled here in the county. So thank you for being here this morning.
Well, thank you, Steve, and I really appreciate the invitation to talk about the County of Orange and the wonderful things that we've accomplished, particularly over the last 9 years as CEO and over a 29-year career. Had some wonderful teammates and colleagues and board members, so really happy to talk about that.
Fantastic. We just have to start. What have your days been like since you have left that post? Walk us through a day, if you would.
Well, I'll tell you, it is a job that demands all of your attention. I used to share with people who would ask that there wasn't an hour that went by during the day, evenings, or weekends where I didn't think about work. And I was surprised to find that the transition was not that difficult. And I would say my days are busy, but they're not hurried, meaning that there's always so many things to do that I've not done. So I'm making more time to exercise, right, to cook, to spend time with my dog, my friends and family. So for the first several weeks, it's been busy catching up on all the things that I've really put as a second priority over the last 9 years.
You know, for someone who spent 3 decades working for one of the largest county governments in America, and a third of that time as its CEO, how did you spend your last day in office?
I'll tell you, the last day in office was somewhat surreal, because over 29 years working day in and day out with so many different colleagues and over multiple departments, I built so many positive relationships with people. So I spent that last day saying goodbye to many of my colleagues, visiting the board offices, appreciating the time and support that they've given me. That's allowed us to accomplish so many things. So it was a day of reflection, a day of visiting with some good friends, answering emails, and doing the last bit of work that I could accomplish on that last day.
Interesting. You know, Orange County is big with nearly 3.2 million residents here, and many of them don't even know there was a CEO or there is a CEO of Orange County. How would you describe your role to an outsider, and how did you manage to succeed in this demanding post?
Well, I'll tell you, there's two different roles in the county. There are things that happen, as I used to say, above the waterline, and those are items of policy and related to contracts and construction that come to the Board of Supervisors on a public agenda. Then there are all those things that happen within our government infrastructure that I am delegated authority to execute. And that happens below the waterline. The public don't see that day-to-day work as much. So typically I would spend 60-70% of my time working that day-to-day work. And what that means is making sure that contracts are executed, that the performance is meeting the expectations, that relationships with local cities, with businesses, with our nonprofit partners, our communities, that help us accomplish all those things in the county, like the United Way, where we work with them on ending homelessness and working with various apartment owners to make affordable housing units available. All those things that I think that the public generally is not aware of, but it takes day-to-day work to put all these things into motion so that ultimately they make their way into a policy action that the board can give us final approval or direction on.
You mentioned homelessness. Soon after you were appointed CEO in 2015, the issue of homelessness, the crisis itself, morphed into a major issue in our county with large encampments forming along the Santa Ana River. You have been quoted as saying the development of Orange County's homeless system of care is one of your proudest accomplishments. What were the key initial steps you took as CEO to really address this crisis, and why has this issue been so personal to you?
I think it was the first major crisis that I addressed working with the board when I came in as CEO. We had a large encampment that was forming along the riverbed near the 57 freeway and near Angel Stadium. And it became so large that it became very public. It created challenges in terms of cleanliness, access to the recreational hikers and bikers that use that facility, as well as the core purpose of that area, which is a flood channel. So it was important for us to keep that channel clean, to address the needs of the homeless population that were in there, and also to find a more appropriate place for those homeless individuals to be, which is either in a shelter, in supportive housing, in treatment, and a number of other alternate modes of living and participating in our community that is more productive than what was happening out in the riverbed. And so the time that we spent out there, we really got a good assessment of what our homeless system of care looked like. We had kind of individual components. We had a law enforcement component that was primarily with the sheriff. Then we had a parks component who managed the riverbed. Then we had the flood channel system who ensure that the flood channel is clean and appropriate for its needed purpose. Then there's outreach component, which was out at healthcare agency. And you stitch it all together, and we had 6 or 7 different departments that were all tackling the issue, but without a structure. We hired a wonderful homeless coordinator. Her name was Susan Price, and she helped us structure all of those disparate components into a system. And that's really what I'm proud of, is that we had an opportunity in the middle of a crisis to bring the board, communicate with the public, and all of our county systems to create an integrated way that we addressed homelessness, meaning that we can engage with you and quickly connect you to services, whether it's drug treatment, it's counseling, domestic violence, it's housing assistance, whatever it is that you needed. We wanted to be able to attack and address all of those issues in an integrated way. And that was lacking in the time that I came in, and we were able to stand that up together. It took a lot of time and effort, but I'm proud to say today we do not have any large encampments in the county. We do not have an issue that cannot be addressed. So I think the public generally has been satisfied that as you drive through our wonderful county, you don't see these encampment issues with the large tent cities and things like that anymore, because we're able to come in and address it in a way that is positive for those individuals that are homeless, as well as for the community who would like to see the individuals served in a way that isn't on public rights of way.
Clearly, progress has been made under your leadership and with a lot of different people contributing. But skeptics would point out that the most recent point in time count showed a double-digit increase in the number of unsheltered, we call them neighbors here at Orange County United Way, but residents who just are on the street still. What is the solution to this, Frank?
Well, I think the difficulty is that there's so much weight put on a 3-day count. The point in time count is 3 days and 1 point during the year. And so when you're out in the community counting homeless individuals with over 1,000 plus volunteers, I think that it's normal that you're going to see some variability in that count. I'm not disputing the fact that the numbers went up, but I would also say in the prior count, the numbers were significantly lower. And so when you come off of a low base, you can see some bumps. I think the most important thing is that within our community, we don't have large encampments. We have a system that's structured to help those individuals, and we're able to address encampments and help our community and establish the kind of robust services that I think our homeless residents deserve.
Switching topics, obviously you were the CEO during the global pandemic. How challenging was it to address what was not only a social and health issue, but it was certainly an economic issue for this county? And what were some of the immediate steps you took that I do know received an awful lot of praise in terms of trying to convene some sort of plan of action to address something we'd never been through before in our lifetimes? Talk about the pandemic.
Wow, that was a very difficult time, not only for Orange County, but obviously our entire nation and the world. I'm not confident. I can't look back on that time and tell you, Steve, that we did everything perfectly. It is something that none of us had the depth of experience in terms of managing. So we did what we believed was the right thing, which was as quickly as possible, stand up, the testing facilities, large scales out at the fairgrounds. And I'd like to thank the Fair Board for their support. And out near Disneyland, and Disney was a wonderful partner that gave us access to large lots. So putting in the infrastructure to do testing, and then putting in the infrastructure to offer the voluntary vaccines for those that wanted to participate in that process, and then making test kits available via mail order for anyone in Orange County free of charge. That infrastructure and logistics, I have a newfound respect for Amazon, UPS, and all those organizations that can manage that, but standing it up on the fly was quite a challenge. Also, we took quite a bit of criticism for the health orders that were in place under the guidance of the state, but counties are arms of the state, so we're required to then implement those policies locally. And I think we all learned quite a bit from that. Things that we saw work well and things that didn't work as well as we had hoped. So it's a good learning experience. Really happy that the county came out of it in a robust manner. But certainly I look back on that time and I'm happy and pleased with a lot of the things that we accomplished, and also have regret for things that could have gone better. It's not a simple it's not a time in my career where I look back on it and feel confident that things went as smoothly as I wanted them to do.
As you look forward, your successor ultimately is identified and comes into office. What are the one or two lessons from the pandemic response that you would share with that individual or government, as it would be at that point, in terms of things they could do better?
I think it's communication. No matter how difficult or uncomfortable the topic, the most important thing that you can do is communicate and identify the rationale for the recommendations on policy, as well as over communicating, right, with the local media and with the general members of the public in all of their natural languages. I think that is something that we've made great strides on. I had local supervisors who encouraged me to stand up a broader multi-language communication structure in the county. And today we do provide all of our communications out in the threshold languages that are very common in our community. So we've made strides in making improvements in terms of our communication structure, but obviously we can always do better.
Sure. You've had so many successes. We've talked about some of them, but do you have a regret, a project, an issue that you wish you would have resolved, but it eluded you? Perhaps time, resources, politics?
I think I have many regrets on things that I wish we would have gotten completed. And I'm confident that they'll get done in the future. But as I think about our development of the property near the El Toro area, the county has 100 acres of property, and I know that we're working on standing up a public health facility there. There'll be some treatment programs. We'd like to do some additional affordable housing and other infrastructure. And that is in the early stages. I wish we could have accelerated that project and completed that during the time that I was CEO, but I know that the staff there will do a wonderful job. But it's one of those rare opportunities where the county has land and an ability to participate in the need for affordable, truly affordable housing.
You know, publicly you've been understandably cautious about speaking out about a successor to you in the post. But if asked, what advice would you give the new CEO on how to best navigate this job?
That's a difficult one. Number one, I think there's multiple stakeholders that you have to build positive working relationships with. One, obviously it's the Board of Supervisors who is your boss, but they all have different views on policy issues. So being able to establish a trusting relationship where they believe you're providing them the facts and a reasoned recommendation on policy, I think that's step one. Number two, any policy that you will bring forward will have those in our community that are supportive and those that are not supportive. So I recall the time that we were siting homeless shelters, or developing a new animal care facility, or even working on a veteran cemetery. Each one of those projects, I could speak to a resident in Orange County and they would think that is the right thing to do. But in terms of location, in terms of scope, in terms of size, there will always be disagreements in our community about where, how big, and what will happen in those locations. So I think one of the second recommendations I would have for a potential candidate is to reach out and have those relationships in the community with the different stakeholders and engage them proactively so that at least you can come across, right, and be able to share your rationale. Otherwise, the challenge becomes you receive criticism, right, as you're in that process, you haven't reached out to those stakeholders, and you're caught, right, defending your position as opposed to proactively reaching out and communicating. And then third is really looking at the internal stakeholders. The CEO position, it's just one job. But as you mentioned earlier, there's 19,000 positions in the county, many elected officials, community stakeholders. You cannot accomplish any of this without being able to lead those 19,000 employees. They have to believe in what they're doing is an appropriate role for government and it's the right policy. So getting that team on board is a really important step.
In your long tenure here in the county, how has Orange County changed over the last 3 decades? What are the most noticeable kinds of changes that have made this a really fascinating community?
Well, I think number one, we've become more diverse. When we look at our community and we look at it during the census, right, we can see the change in terms of the demographics of our county. One, we're getting older. Two, there's a multicultural element of our Orange County residents that is changing dramatically. And three, if you look at the policies, we're becoming more blue, right? And we're looking at policy issues from our residents that are asking our board members to consider different programs to support our community. So there's a policy change, there's kind of an age demographic change, and then there's a multicultural element.
Now asking you to look ahead 15, 20 years, where do you think Orange County will be? What kind of changes beyond the diversity, which is a strength, I believe, here in this county, but what kinds of real tangible changes do you anticipate seeing in this county?
Well, I think number one, I have full confidence that we will continue to be a robust economic engine for the state and the nation, that we will have very strong leadership. I really, in the time that I was with the county, I couldn't be more impressed with how our residents and our form of government operate, right? Working with the cities in Orange County and the state. While we may have differences, that governmental structure really provides this basic core infrastructure that I often feel that our residents take for granted, right? When we came here, we drove on public streets. We may have been on a public freeway, right? We are in this beautiful building that has wonderful access to water, right? To electricity, to all of the supportive services that allow businesses to thrive. And that basic infrastructure is government, local government, whether it's cities or the county or the special districts. And to be a part of that is truly amazing in terms of an experience that I could have one small role in helping ensure that that infrastructure is there to support our residents, for our businesses, for the communities and family members who enjoy it every day. And that, I think, is a legacy for local government.
You know, finally, taking off your civil servant hat and the role you've played, but just as a member of our community, a longtime member and resident here in Orange County, what are your hopes for the future of Orange County?
Well, what I hope about the future of Orange County is that we continue to build on really what I find is a deep-rooted compassion and a sense of community that exists within all of our neighborhoods in the county. I think we're really blessed to have over 3 million people in a very small geographic area, and we have opportunities to visit Little Saigon, to visit Little Arabia, to visit all those different communities that make Orange County, as you said, such a wealth of culture and a true asset. And that gives us eyes into how we interact with different communities. And in all of that, to me, what we create is a sense of harmony. And we demonstrate within our community how we can all live and thrive and work together.
Well, Frank, a final question. We certainly talked about the scope, scale of the position that you have held for 9 years until recently. It's a difficult position. There is a tremendous amount of, I'm sure, stress at times. You're working with a 5-person board that doesn't always agree with you or is difficult in terms of finding consensus. How do you sort of deal with that, navigate that, and how do you sort of find the right qualities to address it and be successful through that?
I think that is one of the greatest challenges of the position. Number one, on policy issues, it is not uncommon that there are differing views amongst the board. Very opposite. And when that happens, my job as the county CEO is, number one, to meet with each of the offices and try to understand the root of what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And then you have to have an assessment of how strongly do each member feel about this policy issue, or is there common ground? Because if they're rooted in their positions, then your job as CEO really is to provide the facts, right? Mm-hmm. And if they ask you for a recommendation, you have to make one based on the facts. And it may side one or the other, and that's a challenge. But if there is some availability of movement, right, then what your role is as CEO is try to be a uniter, find a way, find common grounds, and maybe each side doesn't get exactly what they want, but you can move them closer to the middle and find some consensus and overlap. I think if you honestly put forward that good faith effort and you have a couple of successes, then you build trust. And that's the most important currency as a CEO between you and your 5 elected board. You have to have trust and currency. And I often tell my staff, you've got to have about 3 wins for every one time where you've got to ask a member, can you please not push on this one issue, right? We have other larger, more important things to accomplish. Let's find a way to have consensus on these smaller issues, and let's really have robust debate on the larger issues. So being able to navigate that takes some nuance and experience and skill. And I can only thank the board for past and present, for their patience and their support in giving me a little bit of that space.
Well, thank you, Frank, very much for your time this morning, the insights, and really for your leadership the past 3 decades here in the county. Tremendous impact, and the county's grateful for the time you've given. I also want to thank our sponsors who help make programs like this on OC World possible, and certainly thank our viewers for taking the time to learn and be a part of OC World.